What if I told you your home might be quietly rejecting your wealth, not because of how hard you work, not because of what you lack, but because of what stands at your threshold? Your front door isn't just a passage, it's a decision point, a filter, a message. And if what lives there is broken, neglected, or confused, then so is the energy that's meant to support you. You may not notice it. Most people don't. We spend hours arranging furniture, choosing wall colors, lighting candles for calm, but we forget the very first moment any energy meets us. The entrance, the mouth of the house, the silent gatekeeper between what wants to enter and what never quite arrives. In classical Feng Shui, this isn't poetic exaggeration, it's core. The front door is called the mouth of Qi, the space where all life force enters. It's not just where visitors knock, it's where opportunity approaches. It's where wealth hesitates, where peace pauses, where the future stands for a moment, waiting to be either welcomed or turned away. Have you ever noticed this pattern? You do everything right, you work hard, pay attention, try to be prepared, and still life feels one step behind. Like money shows up, but disappears. Like luck passes near you, but never through you. Like you're always in motion, but going nowhere. What if, just what if, the problem isn't inside you, but right outside your front door? Let me offer you something quieter than advice. A possibility that the space you pass through every day without thinking, the space you step over with groceries and car keys and phone calls and busyness, might be holding the key to your next chapter. Not because it's magic, but because it speaks, because space, like people, carries intention. And your entrance, whether lovingly tended or quietly ignored, is broadcasting a message to you, to your guests, and to whatever energy is meant to find you. Let's pause here, just for a breath. Picture your front door, not just the structure, but the feeling. Is it clean, clear, warm? Or is it dim, cluttered, rusted, overlooked? What's the first thing your eyes see when you come home? And more importantly, what's the first thing your energy touches? You don't need to answer out loud, just notice. Because if you felt stuck lately, in money, in momentum, in clarity, it may not be about your habits. It may be about your threshold. And in today's video, we're going to walk through that threshold together. Not to redesign it, but to understand it. Not to rearrange for beauty, but to realign for flow. I'll be sharing with you 3 foundational principles, small, specific, powerful adjustments that can transform the way energy enters your life. These are not superstitions, they're not rituals, they are functional corrections drawn from centuries of spatial wisdom, based on how the world moves, how energy travels, and how your home speaks back to you when no one else is around. We'll explore why lighting, simple, everyday lighting, can be the difference between a stagnant space and a magnetic one. Why the wrong mirror can quietly deflect your fortune away. Why something as old-fashioned as a jar of salt near the door might help cleanse not just the space, but the emotional weight that crosses its line. And yes, I'll also show you what to avoid. The things people overlook. The dusty welcome mats, the squeaky hinges, the cluttered piles of packages that, without meaning to, tell the world, this house is too full, there's no room for more. But before we begin, before we step into these ideas together, I want to ask something small from you. If this way of thinking resonates with you, if it touches something you felt but couldn't name, I invite you to stay, to walk with me through this reflection. And if you'd like to support this work, this quiet journey of reconnecting space with spirit, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, or subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. I'm walking slowly toward 1,000 subscribers, not for applause, not for status, but to be able to continue sharing insights like these with those who might need them. People who aren't drawn to noise, people who want more than life hacks and home trends, people who are looking for stillness, precision, meaning. In the spaces they walk through every day, if you're one of them, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Now take a quiet breath. Picture the entrance of your home again, and imagine this, that what you've been seeking might already be outside, waiting not for effort, but for a signal, waiting not for struggle, but for space. Let's make that space together. 1. The entrance as an energetic mouth. The body has a mouth, the home does too, but unlike the one we use to speak, this one speaks without words. It listens without ears. It feeds not the stomach, but the soul of a space. In classical Feng Shui, the front door is called the mouth of Qi, and like the human mouth, it performs a singularly vital function. It receives, it draws in, it takes what is offered by the world and decides whether to swallow, to speak, or to shut. Through this passage flows the breath of the house, and if this mouth is blocked, if it's dry, forgotten, tight, or choked, no matter how beautiful the interior is, the home remains undernourished. It's a principle so simple that it often goes unnoticed. And perhaps that's the problem. Most people spend months designing interiors, living rooms styled with care, bedrooms softened with warm light, kitchens equipped with everything but quiet. But they forget the beginning. They forget the gate. They forget the space where all other spaces are introduced. It's like hosting a dinner with candlelight and music, but greeting the guest with a locked door. The warmth never gets to begin. The entrance is not just the first point of entry for physical bodies. It is the first point of entry for everything invisible. Energy, emotion, fortune, clarity. And what's placed there, how it's kept, how it's lit, how it breathes, tells the entire story of what the house allows itself to receive. In many ancient homes across Asia, the front step was not just a physical platform, it was a ritual space. It was swept each morning before anything else. Not because someone was coming, but because something always is. The act itself became a message. We are ready. And yet, in so many modern homes, the entrance has lost its reverence. It's become a place of transition, of pass-through, a landing zone for shoes, keys, unopened mail, half-dead plants. Not out of neglect, but out of speed. Life moves fast. We rush out and rush in. And in that rushing, we forget that even energy needs a pause, that even opportunity needs an invitation, that even luck prefers clarity to chaos. This isn't superstition. This is architecture of the unseen. Just as wind follows open paths and light seeks clean surfaces, Qi, life force, seeks clarity. And when it meets a door that squeaks or sticks, a mat that hasn't been touched in weeks, a threshold layered with grime or fatigue, it does not settle, it moves on. Not with anger, not as punishment, simply because the space did not call it to stay. In Buddhist spatial philosophy, this is not unlike the teachings of karmic readiness. It is said that blessings do not come because we demand them. They come because we are prepared to receive them. Not through loudness, but through stillness. Not through accumulation, but through arrangement. And the front door is the first arrangement. It is the place where the inner and outer worlds bow to each other. Just once, before the rest of life unfolds. So when you look at your entrance, don't ask only, is it clean? Is it pretty? Is it open? Is it soft? Does it speak of invitation? Or does it whisper retreat? Does it say, come in? Or does it say, not yet? These questions are not for judgment. They are for revelation. Because the moment you see the entrance for what it truly is, not just a structure, but a symbol, you begin to understand why some homes feel generous and others feel guarded. Why some doors feel magnetic and others feel tired. And here's the truth most forget. You do not have to build a new home to receive a new future. You only need to tend the doorway, a place that seems so small, yet touches everything that follows. Because when the mouth of the house opens with grace, the body of the house learns how to breathe again. 2. The 3 anchors of fortune. A. Light, the first messenger. Before anything enters a space, before words are spoken, before energy even makes a decision, there is one messenger that speaks first. Light. It is not just a tool for visibility. It is the very first signal your home gives to the world and to the energy that approaches it. And like any messenger, light doesn't just reveal, it announces. It clarifies what kind of space this is and what kind of reception it offers. In classical Feng Shui, light is considered a primary activator of yang energy, It's not merely about brightness, it's about vitality. A well-lit doorway does not shout. It welcomes, it opens. It tells all that approaches, whether a visitor, a feeling, or an unseen flow, that this home is awake, alive, receptive, and ready. Many homes do not lack warmth, they lack light. Not because they are unloved, but because they are unobserved. A flickering bulb at the entrance, left unaddressed for weeks, a porch cast in shadow by overgrown leaves, a warm interior tucked behind a doorway no one can see. And then we wonder why things move slowly, why clarity doesn't come, why fortune hesitates. In the language of space, darkness at the threshold is a pause, a question mark, a space that says, perhaps not today. But light has a memory. It doesn't require extravagance, only consistency. A soft bulb that works every time. A clean fixture that doesn't dim the glow. A curtain drawn back in the morning to let sunlight spill toward the front step. These aren't aesthetic choices. They're directional cues. They tell Qi, this is a place that tends itself. This is a space that sees. One client once told me, I don't like bright lights at the door. It feels aggressive. And I understood. But this isn't about harshness. It's about warmth. It's about invitation. There's a difference between blinding brightness and golden clarity. And even if your entrance is modest, even if it faces a quiet alley or a shared corridor, the light you choose still holds meaning. Because the moment it shines, the space shifts. Not just physically, but energetically. A dim hallway becomes a soft welcome. A forgotten bulb becomes a thread of attention. A once ignored doorstep becomes the beginning of something intentional. And this matters because in the quiet architecture of energy, the entrance is not where life ends. It's where it begins. Every decision you make inside your home, how you speak, what you eat, what you believe you deserve, is subtly influenced by the message you receive at the edge. And when that message is shrouded, foggy, or dull, your momentum will reflect it, not out of punishment, but out of harmony. A dark door teaches you to be cautious. A lit one reminds you to open. This is why ancient temples, from Kyoto to Kathmandu, never leave their gates in darkness. Even in silence, there is light. A lantern, a flame, a single bulb burning not for function, but for remembrance. That before one steps into sacredness, there must be clarity. Before one receives, there must be presence. So walk outside tonight or tomorrow morning. Stand at the threshold, not from inside looking out, but from the world looking in. What does your doorway say? What does it signal? Is it an invitation or an afterthought? And if you find it lacking, don't despair. Light is the easiest correction. One bulb changed, one fixture cleaned, one curtain drawn back, and the entire flow adjusts. You do not need new furniture. You only need a new signal. Because in Feng Shui and in life, the fortune you attract even begins with the clarity you offer. B. Clean reflection. The mirror principle. If light is the first messenger, then reflection is the first response. A mirror, when placed with intention, does not simply show an image. It reveals a relationship. It's not passive. It's participatory. And nowhere is this more potent than near the entrance of a home. In Feng Shui, a mirror is never just a decorative piece. It is a tool of multiplication, a field of invitation. What it sees, it amplifies. What it faces, it duplicates, not only in form, but in feeling. And that's where its power lies. Because a mirror placed near your front door has the ability to double what enters, but it also has the power to repel, confuse, or scatter if misaligned. The ancient texts were subtle in their warnings. Never place a mirror directly opposite the front door. To do so is to create resistance, a visual bounce, a pushback, so that energy, instead of entering and flowing inward, meets itself and retreats. It's not superstition, it's rhythm. It's like inviting someone in, only to immediately show them their reflection. Instead of crossing the threshold, they pause, they hesitate, and often they turn around. But when a mirror is placed beside the door, slightly to the left or right, its function changes. It no longer confronts, it accompanies, it catches light, it reflects the gesture of welcome. It doubles what is pleasing, a vase of fresh flowers, a glimpse of green from outside, a tidy hallway. It quietly tells the incoming chi, there is more where this came from. The shape matters too. In most cases, a round or oval mirror is preferred. Curved lines soften energy. They invite harmony. They suggest continuity. A round mirror at the entrance is like a still pond, calm, receptive, yet deeply alert. It doesn't fracture what it sees. It holds it, honors it, and that too becomes a message. But perhaps the most overlooked aspect of the mirror is what it's asked to witness. A dusty pile of mail, a cluttered shoe rack, a dark corner. Mirrors don't discriminate. They reflect whatever is placed in front of them, lovingly but without editing. So before placing a mirror, ask, what is it being asked to speak into repetition? What truth is it being told to echo? There was a client once, a florist oddly enough, whose business had begun to slow. When I visited her space, I noticed a mirror near her entrance, beautifully framed, but it faced a staircase cluttered with empty boxes and unused supplies. Every customer who walked in was met not with blooms, but with burden. Every reflection said, there's too much here. We moved the mirror, we cleared the space, and slowly her clients began to return, not because the mirror was magic, but because the message had changed. That's the true function of a mirror. Not to decorate, but to clarify. Not to impress, but to repeat what's already there, until it becomes real, until it becomes louder, until it becomes your pattern. So look now or later at the entrance of your own home. If there's a mirror nearby, ask what it's amplifying. And if there isn't one yet, ask what you would want to see reflected back, not only to the room, but to yourself. And if the answer is beauty, calm, or space, then make room for that to be seen. Because when a mirror is placed with awareness, it doesn't just reflect light, it reflects intention. And intention, when given a surface to echo upon, becomes form, becomes flow, becomes fortune. See the salt jar, subtle protector. Not all protectors wear armor. Some sit quietly near the door, silent, unmoving, almost invisible. And yet they absorb what others cannot. In the world of Feng Shui, salt is one of the simplest yet most enduring tools for quiet protection. Not because it blocks harm in the dramatic sense, but because it knows how to hold what doesn't belong. Salt is born of the sea, shaped by sun, carried through centuries in kitchens, temples, trade routes, and healing rituals. It is foundational. It purifies not by force, but by absorption. It doesn't confront energy. It collects it. It stabilizes it. And at the entrance of a home where the outer world meets your inner world, that act becomes sacred. A clean glass jar, no more than the size of your palm, filled with dry, unprocessed salt and a single coin, becomes a kind of filter. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't ward off in the theatrical sense. What it does is subtler, more elegant. It catches the residue that walks in uninvited. Fatigue from the office, tension from a conversation outside, invisible static from a chaotic commute. Energy doesn't always knock. It clings. And salt, when placed gently at the gate, knows how to say, leave that here, you don't need to carry it further. The coin isn't about wealth in the literal sense. It's about intention, a token of worth, a placeholder of clarity. It says to the salt, don't just absorb, balance. It grounds the exchange. It gives the jar a reason to hold and not just scatter. Together, the salt and the coin form a quiet dialogue between what enters and what stays behind. But here's what many forget. Like any tool of care, the salt must be cared for in return. It cannot absorb endlessly. It too needs clearing. A jar left for months, gathering dust or moisture, becomes less a protector and more a passive weight. That's why it should be refreshed monthly. Not as a ritual, but as a rhythm, on the first day of a new month, on a full moon, or simply when the air in your home feels heavier than it should. Replace the salt, wipe the jar, reset the intention. It takes 2 minutes, and the effect ripples far beyond. A client once told me she felt inexplicably drained every time she entered her home. No clutter, no noise, but something in the air clung to her skin. I asked about her entrance. She laughed. Just shoes and keys. I suggested a salt jar, nothing elaborate, just a clean vessel, tucked discreetly near the shoe cabinet. Weeks later, she emailed him not to say her life had changed overnight, but to say she no longer carried the day inside with her. She began entering her space lighter, more whole, as if something at the door had finally said, "You can leave that here." That's the essence of subtle protection. Not a shield, not a defense, but a companion. Something small and deliberate that reminds you, you don't have to bring everything inside. The world can be loud, but your threshold can be quiet. And in that quiet, fortune lingers longer. So if you have space, even the smallest corner, make room for this gesture. Some salt, a coin. Not for magic, for clarity, for balance, for the dignity of a home that knows what to keep and what to let go. 3. Misplaced symbols and hidden signals. Every home has a front door, but not every home has a welcome. Some have a warning, not intentional, not hostile, but lingering all the same. And that warning doesn't come in the form of words. It comes through objects, through what's left behind, what's overlooked, what accumulates in the corners where we no longer see. These are the misplaced symbols, the quiet signals that speak louder than we realize. A soggy doormat, a stack of unopened packages, an umbrella still dripping from 2 days ago. These aren't just signs of weather or routine. In the language of energy, they are interruptions. A wet mat doesn't just hold moisture, it holds hesitation. It suggests that this space, this threshold, is still in process, still catching up, not yet ready. Shoes left scattered like fallen leaves don't just create clutter, they imply departure, not arrival. And when this is the first impression that energy receives, it adjusts accordingly. Think of it like this. Energy is not sentimental. It doesn't say, "they mean well." It reads what is present. And what is present, when disorder is the first thing it meets, is ambiguity, stagnation, confusion. When she approaches a space and sees water pooling where it shouldn't, objects stacked with no rhythm, surfaces ignored, it responds by pausing, by dispersing, by leaving quietly the same way it came. And yet, so much of this disorder is born not from neglect, but from speed. We rush in, groceries in one hand, phone in the other. The package is dropped, the shoes are kicked off, the keys are tossed. I'll clean it later. But later becomes next week, and next week becomes a month. The threshold becomes a loading zone. And then we wonder why we feel heavy, why our intentions don't stick, why good news feels delayed. It's not personal, it's spatial. The entrance has become a holding cell, not a passage. I once visited a home where the front step was cracked, just slightly, not dangerous, not even noticeable unless you look down. But above it, a wind chime hung crooked, one of its bells missing. To the side, a potted plant had long since dried, its soil pale and pulling from the edges. Inside, the homeowner said she felt blocked, that no matter what she tried, nothing quite landed. Career plans, relationships, even small decisions felt murky. She was articulate, disciplined, curious. But her entrance spoke a different language. It said, delay. It said, I am not being watched. None of these symbols, the broken tile, the dead plant, the forgotten sound, were dramatic on their own. But together they formed a subtle pattern. And space, like spirit, responds to patterns. When your entrance tells the world, I'm not sure, the world reflects that back to you in kind. Even well-intentioned items can send the wrong message. A decorative bell whose rust flakes each time it swings doesn't ring in fortune, it whispers fatigue. A once beautiful painting, now faded and water-stained, does not uplift. It quietly broadcasts neglect. These are not judgments, they are observations. And in the practice of Feng Shui, observation is the first act of care. Because here is the deeper truth. What we allow to live at the edge of our home becomes the boundary of our readiness. When that edge is clean, lit, and respected, it becomes a bridge. When it is chaotic, dim, or unloved, it becomes a wall. And she, just like creativity, clarity, and confidence, will not enter through a wall. So ask yourself gently, what's the first thing your guests see? Not just guests of flesh and blood, but guests of energy. Guests like inspiration, opportunity, calm. Are they being welcomed or are they being asked to wait? This is not about perfection, it's about posture. The entrance should not be flawless, it should be coherent. It should say with quiet assurance, I know what I'm letting in, I know what I'm leaving out. And when that message is clear, even the subtlest of gestures, a swept step, a fixed latch, a blooming pot, becomes a signal, a magnet, a soft-spoken yes. You don't need to renovate your home. You don't need to buy anything new. You simply need to look again. Not as the owner, but as the energy itself. Stand at the edge. Look inward. What does it feel like? What is being asked? What is being answered? Because the future doesn't knock loudly. It waits at the door, not for noise, but for space. And the moment you make room, it steps in. 4. A real-life turnaround. She had spent her life working with threads, shaping silhouettes, fixing seams, listening to the quiet measurements of cloth and body. For nearly 40 years, Madame Bedemlian had been the go-to seamstress in her Hanoi neighborhood. Brides came to her before their weddings. Businessmen came before promotions. Students before exams. They believed her hands held precision, but also something more, something comforting, reliable, seasoned. She didn't advertise. She didn't need to. People found her because her presence felt like continuity. But then something shifted. Quietly at first, orders slowed. Clients stopped calling. Her sign faded in the sun. For a while, she thought it was the economy or the younger generation who preferred factories over tailoring. Then she blamed herself. Maybe she had become too old, too slow. Maybe the world had passed her by. She kept her head down, kept stitching, but inside something tightened. Her days began to blur. The rhythm frayed. It wasn't until a friend, a retired teacher from down the alley, stopped by with a bundle of herbs and a gentle question. Have you looked at your front gate lately? And at first, Madame Lien laughed. My gate? What does that have to do with anything? But the next morning, with the sun barely up, she walked outside and really looked. Not with habit, with attention. The gate was rusted. One hinge creaked like a protest with every movement. A vine had grown over the nameplate. The concrete step leading into her space was cracked and uneven. The wind chime, once gifted by a client from Dalat, now hung askew, one of its arms missing. The small potted plant by the wall had dried into something more brittle than soil. It was all small, all explainable, but together it told a story. Not to the world, to her, that she had slowly, imperceptibly stopped expecting guests, stopped making space for new beginnings, that her home no longer announced care. It whispered fatigue. She hadn't closed her doors on purpose, but the entrance had done it for her. She didn't tell anyone what she planned. She simply got to work. She cleaned the gate, painted it soft gray, and not flashy but fresh. She repaired the hinge, replaced the broken chime with a bamboo one that clicked and whispered gently in the afternoon breeze. She added a simple mat with no words, just texture, a touch of warmth. She placed a rounded mirror beside the door, not opposite, and next to the mirror, a jar of salt, small, glass, dry. She didn't believe in superstition, but she did believe in atmosphere, and the air somehow already felt lighter. She didn't expect anything. She wasn't chasing clients. She was reintroducing herself to her own threshold. The change wasn't cinematic, no miracle, no viral photo, but it came slowly like a tide. One neighbor noticed, then another. Someone brought a pair of trousers. A week later, a wedding dress. The local newspaper did a piece on legacy artisans, and her name surfaced again. Then, unexpectedly, her younger brother, who hadn't visited in 5 years, showed up with mangoes and no explanation. He stood at the gate and smiled. Your place looks alive again. And that was it. Not magic, not karma paid in full, just movement, just permission, just the return of flow. When she reflected on it months later, Madame Lien didn't credit any one object. Not the mat, not the chime, not even the salt jar. She credited the act, the return of attention, the quiet declaration that her space still mattered, that her doorway could still say, welcome. That's the essence of Feng Shui when practiced with humility. It's not about attracting miracles, it's about removing static. And when the static clears, the signal comes through. For her, the signal was simple. You are still open. And for us, for anyone listening, the question becomes just as simple. Is your entrance telling the world that you've closed, or that you're still available to receive? Because sometimes the fortune you seek doesn't need a wider doorway. It just needs one that no longer leaks, no longer confuses, no longer hides behind rust and routine. It needs a threshold that says, I see you, and means it. What to avoid? Subtle yet powerful mistakes. Some signals are not loud, but they are clear. And the doorway, that quiet stretch between the outer world and your inner sanctuary, reads those signals with perfect precision. It doesn't need explanations. It doesn't wait for your intentions to catch up. It simply reflects what is already there. And sometimes what's already there sends the wrong message. Not through drama, through dust, through neglect, through 1,000 small decisions made unconsciously, day after day. Take, for example, a squeaky hinge, a door that groans when it moves. Maybe you've stopped hearing it, but space hasn't. Sound has memory, and in Feng Shui, sound is part of structure. A hinge that squeaks doesn't just suggest wear, it speaks of resistance. A gate that drags over the ground doesn't only inconvenience your footstep, it tells incoming energy, this passage is under strain. These are not catastrophic flaws. But when repeated, when left uncorrected, they begin to pattern the space with friction. Then there are loose tiles, the barely noticeable wobble beneath your foot as you step inside. It may not trip you, but it speaks of instability. It says, this foundation isn't sure of itself. And that message lingers, not just in the floor, but in the mindset. Because when the body feels that something is shifting underfoot, even microscopically, the spirit hesitates. Or think of the symbols we place with good intention, but without reflection. A plant near the door is often beautiful, but if it bristles with thorns, if it grows sharp and downward, it becomes not an invitation, but a signal of defense. And defense, even when subconscious, changes the entire mood of the threshold. The home begins to say, proceed carefully. And energy, like emotion, like opportunity, is sensitive. It listens for tone, sharp-edged sculptures, jagged art, doorbells with shrill tones. These elements don't just decorate, they agitate. Especially when placed too close to the entrance, they stir a kind of nervousness in the space. They may look modern, but energy doesn't judge trends. It listens for resonance. And resonance at the gate must be smooth. At the same time, there's the opposite problem. Items so small, so apologetically placed, that they disappear. A tiny mirror lost in a hallway, a narrow rug with no anchoring color, a bell so faint it never chimes. These gestures don't harm, but they also don't help. In Feng Shui, scale matters, not because of visual impact, but because of presence. A symbol that is too small can't hold its posture. It flickers instead of affirming. And when the space is unsure, energy becomes uncertain. This is where many people misunderstand the entrance. They treat it as a crossing. But in truth, it is a threshold of declaration. It's not enough for it to be neutral. It must affirm, not with extravagance, but with clarity. It must say you are welcome, not we didn't think about this, not we meant to clean this, not we'll fix it someday. Because when space is ambiguous, so is the flow. And ambiguity at the door becomes stagnation in the heart of the home. This doesn't mean your entry must be luxurious. It doesn't need new furniture or imported tiles. What it needs deeply is coherence, alignment. The objects placed there should feel intentional. The sounds smooth, the proportions balanced. A space that feels like it belongs to someone who is awake. A few years ago, I visited a home with an entrance that had everything. Beautiful art, fragrant plants, a small bench, but none of it worked. The art was hung too high, the plants were too wide. The bench, though lovely, blocked the side view of the door. And when I stood at the gate, I didn't feel calm. I felt crowded. like I was being asked to admire, not to arrive. It looked curated, but not lived in, not welcoming. The homeowner was confused, but I followed every rule, she said, and I gently replied, you followed form, but the flow feels like performance, because this too matters. An entrance must feel like truth, not like a magazine. You're not staging a showroom. You're preparing a passage for the invisible to become visible. So ask yourself not just what you've placed at your door, but how it speaks, how it sounds, how it breathes. Does it block? Does it bristle? Or does it invite? Remember, the entrance is a conversation between you and the future, between your inner life and the world that approaches it. And that conversation deserves fluency. It deserves care, and above all, it deserves clarity. Final. Pause with me for a moment. Take one last quiet breath before you move on to the next thing. And ask yourself gently, what lives at your threshold right now? Not just the shoes or the tiles or the decor, but the atmosphere, the posture, the mood of your entrance. What is it whispering to the world about what you are ready to receive? Because everything we've explored today, the light, the mirror, the salt, the mistakes, the repair, they all come back to whooping one quiet truth. That energy doesn't enter randomly. It looks for signs. It listens for space. It pays attention to what we think doesn't matter. And so often we block the very things we long for, not out of fear, but out of forgetfulness. But once you remember, the shift begins. Once you turn your eyes to the doorway, really turn them, your home begins to move differently. Your day starts on different terms, and your fortune, once hesitant, begins to knock again. Wealth, after all, is not accumulation. It is movement. It is flow. It is warmth that keeps returning. And for it to reach you, your space must know how to receive, not perfectly, but consciously. And it begins right at the edge. So if this reflection stirred something in you, a memory, a curiosity, a sense of maybe it's time, I gently invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what lives at your entrance. Tell me what you've seen shift when you started to care for the space you once overlooked. And if you'd like to support this quiet journey, this weaving of ancient insights into the fabric of our modern lives, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who may need a gentle nudge toward their own doorway, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We are walking toward the 1,000 subscribers, not for volume, but to continue creating these still spaces together, where silence speaks, space teaches, and the world feels a little more aligned with the rhythm inside your heart.